Dip your toes in the water. Just don't expect them to still be there when you pull your foot back out. We're going on a fishing trip today, so grab the tackle box, get your favorite fishing pole, and just to be extra safe, maybe you should rent a full steel set of enchanted armor to ward off the ghosts, ghouls, and creeps that seem to love to bother people when they're just trying to enjoy the water and get a good catch. Enjoy these allegedly true fishing scary stories, and be sure to share your stories with us to possibly have them narrated. Just go to darknessprevailsofficial.discussion.community. Don't worry, that long-winded URL will be fixed soon. Now, let's head down to the water. Mist on the Lake, from Scared as Heck 123. Location: Broken Bow, Oklahoma. This happened when I was about 17. Some friends and I had decided to take a trip to Broken Bow Lake that is located near Oklahoma. It was only a few years ago, and I can remember everything like it was yesterday. It was the summer, and me and 6 other friends had planned to stay for 3 nights. We planned on camping, fishing, hiking, everything that's fun to do outdoors. We arrived at our usual spot. The coals from our previous trips here were still there in the fire pits. We began to unpack our trucks, setting up our tents next to each other, which was an excuse for me and the guys to get to the girls easier. There were 2 other guys besides me. They were Aiden and James. We'd all brought along our girlfriends, Macy, Mia, and Alice respectively. We had unpacked our gear. Relieved that that was done, I decided to take a walk down to the water's edge. I put my feet in the water. It was perfect, the most relaxing filling water. I called back up to everyone, saying that it felt perfect for a swim. Within the space of 30 seconds, we were all in the water, having a great time. After about an hour of swimming, I had an uneasy feeling, because I swear I felt something smooth brush against my leg. I screamed at that moment for everyone to get out of the water. By the time I was on shore, everyone else was there and confused, wondering what had happened. That's when Aiden let out a shriek, went under the water again, then came back up holding what appeared to be a catfish. He had pranked us, making fun of me, saying that all I felt was just a catfish. I blushed with embarrassment. After that, everyone got out of the water, drying off on the hot rocks next to the lake. We then got a fire going. It may have been hot, but what was camping without a fire? The night went smoothly until about midnight. I made a passing glance toward the lake, but I did a double take and stared when I saw a humanoid shape sitting on the edge of the lake, hunched over. I quickly said to everyone in a loud whisper, "Guys, look over there." Immediately they looked, but by the time they did, the figure was gone, and they were starting to think that I was crazy. Now, I'd be willing to pass it off as my imagination, but when everyone got into their tents for the night and drifted off to sleep, I began to hear something right outside my tent. I thought it was James or Aiden or one of the girls, until I heard whatever it was beginning to sob. It was not one of my friends. I did not recognize this voice at all. I got out of my blanket slowly. I took a big breath in. Then I cried at the top of my lungs for everyone to wake up. Surprisingly, the creature outside my tent acted oblivious to this, not moving. For a second, you would think that it was made of stone. My friends and I rushed outside of our tents and stood frozen, staring at this abomination for a good 10 seconds. It was so skinny, almost skeletal. It was a light gray in color and had no hair on its body at all. Its limbs were extremely thin, with fingers that stretched nearly 10 inches. As we stared at it, the most terrifying thing happened. In one swift, barely noticeable motion, it turned and screeched right at us. I had never heard a sound quite like that before. Immediately, my eyes began to water, and my entire back was flooded with goosebumps. I got a good look at its eyes then, which were solid milky white. It had to be blind with eyes like that. Then it sprinted off on all fours right into the lake, and I never saw it again. My friends and I still talk about it at times, but I can't really bring it up without having nightmares the same night. I'll never forget this experience. Who knows what the thing was, but that lake has never been the same to me ever since. Chased by a Skinwalker, from NobleSavage. Location unknown. I'd like to remain anonymous. I will not go beyond my username. I'm Navajo, and we are not supposed to talk about Skinwalkers. I don't want my family to know the stupid things I did when I was younger. But I could not resist sharing this story. The story begins with my older brother Shane, along with my younger cousins Lauren and Justin, at my grandmother's house. We were alone together that night. We were happy to have the house to ourselves for the night, while the adults went to a nearby relative's place for a dinner. The oldest of us had the idea to go to the nearby pond and try to do some late-night fishing. The pond we go to is near a cliff, and the trail to the pond is surrounded by a thick wooded area and is also near a cliff wall. As we got closer to the pond, my cousin Lauren started to talk about a game he plays with his friend, where they apparently try to summon unnatural entities. He began to talk about the details on how they would whistle at the night, then call out old Navajo words for creatures 4 times in a row. After that, Lauren began to taunt me, Shane, and Justin, saying that we weren't brave enough to play his game with him. Getting annoyed at this, and thinking myself fearless, I found a big rock to stand on, and I turned my back toward the woods. Then I began to yell out the word for Skinwalker 4 times. After the 4th time, my eyes widened when we heard a whistling sound. At that moment, I knew I had made a mistake. Chills ran down my spine, and the hairs on my body began to stand up. Slowly, I turned to face the woods. We scanned the area together, trying to find the source of that whistle. We then realized that it was coming from the top of the cliff. As we gaze upwards, there's a man or something standing at the top. He was of average height and skinny, but his skin was gray pale, covered in black marks. It was like what you call corpse paint. His hair was messy. His eyes were a bright, dirty yellow. He glared down at us. At that moment, I was petrified, and all we could do was stare back. He then kneels down, slowly placing his hand on the cliff's edge, and completely defying physics, he starts climbing down the cliff, his head facing downward to the bottom, using all 4 of his limbs to crawl like an insect. The best way to describe the way he looked was how Spider-Man climbs down a building. When he finally reaches the bottom, that's when we booked it out of there, running all the way back to the house. As we were running back, you could hear an extra pair of footsteps right behind us. The sound of those footsteps would change directions, going to the right, then to the left, then behind us. As we ran, curiosity came over me, so I took a glance back. As I looked, I saw not a man, but a coyote chasing us. I then remembered what my mother once told me, to never look a Skinwalker directly in the eye, or the victim will fall very ill or even perish. I turned my head with tears in my eyes and I continued to run. We finally made it back to my grandmother's house, where we ran inside and locked the door. We dared not look out the windows. We settled down in the living room, but soon heard the sound of tapping on the living room windows. We all jumped up, facing the glass. Even with the curtains closed, the eyes on this thing could be seen shining from the other side. This Skinwalker then backed away from the window. When his eyes disappeared, a loud bang came from above us. You could hear footsteps running around on the roof. The creature began to bang on the roof, tormenting us. We huddled together in our fright, putting our heads down to face the floor. The banging grew louder and louder until it all just stopped. I do not remember what happened. I just remember waking up on the floor with my brother and 2 cousins in the living room an unknown amount of time later. As I fully gained my awareness back, I went outside to see tracks surrounding the house. These tracks belonged to a barefoot man. I followed the tracks, which headed back into the woods. I scanned the forest again, this time finding nothing. Even after all of this happened, we walked to the pond that night and we fished, somehow oddly calm and okay with what had happened. Maybe if we leave them alone, they'll leave us alone, and everything will be safe. Madness in the Woods, from TR06 Crow. Location, Texas. There is a dark side to this seemingly safe and normal city of mine. It may not be historical, but there are certainly ancient things that roam these woods. There are these hotspots, if you will. One such place, also being possibly the most active place, is a little railroad crossing, maybe 10 minutes from my own house. There is a river there that runs underneath an old, aged bridge. There's a trail on each side of the riverbank to go down the river. The vegetation is thick and various in species. There is a small marshy area to the left of the bridge on the eastern bank, and on the western side, there is graffiti on the walls and odd patches of dead or sparse grass. This first event was on my friend's birthday in 2011. His name is Rick. Our other friends, Jonathan and Keith, were over. We had finished eating at Cece's Pizza for dinner, and we all wanted to head back home to work some of it off. But instead, we decided to go explore the tracks and possibly do some fishing. About halfway down these tracks to the bridge, we spotted a medium-sized black dog sitting at the eastern trailhead. He watched us as we walked. We assumed that it belonged to someone who was down here fishing or swimming. As we continued, it walked down the riverbank and continued to watch us. We approached the riverbank down the steep trail and realized that there wasn't anyone else there. We also noticed that the dog was gone. We wondered which way it went, thinking maybe something had happened. We saw tracks headed south through the marshy area and into some rather thick and tall vegetation, like elephant ears, buffalo grass, vines, and trees. Jonathan and I followed them rather swiftly, while Rick and Keith took their time behind us. Eventually, the trail led to an opening. Now, the grass in this opening was much shorter than the rest. Trees surrounded it. The dog must have gone through the southernmost side, and as we entered the clearing, 4 more came out of the tree line. So we froze. The hair on our bodies began to stand on end. We felt trapped and in danger, like we had been lured here for some reason. Slowly, almost tauntingly, the first dog came out of the brush. Then it sat down about 3 feet away from us, staring at us. The eyes looked solid black, Not the usual dark brown, just solid dark like the night black. We began to back up, telling the other two behind us to not come any closer. The dogs were sitting almost uniformly, like carefully watching statues, just glaring. We made it back to the top of the trail and started to run back to the house, when suddenly we see the dogs jumping across the tracks. The same dogs that were just on the ground 30 feet below and about a 1/16 of a mile away. They were leaping over the tracks in a way that looked like they were floating. In fact, they appeared to be leaving traces of their images behind them as they moved. "Stop!" I shouted. "What is going on?" Patrick replied, "Guys, what is that?" He sounded like he was in shock. We turned around to see a very large white creature. It had piercing yellow eyes. Standing on all fours, it was about 5.5 feet tall and was built like a tank. It resembled a wolf or some other large dog breed, but there was something wrong about its appearance. The other dogs scattered at the sight of it. It eventually backed down the trail, never looking away, and let me tell you, we booked it back to the house. We got inside and Rick's mom was looking at us oddly, wondering why the four of us were breathing so heavily. But all we could say was dogs, tracks, bigger dog. His mother was not a skeptic and thankfully did not just dismiss our story. That was not the last encounter we had in that area. This next one happened about a year or so later in 2012, and at this point we were intrigued by those tracks and fascinated by whatever may be inhabiting that area, worldly or otherworldly. One afternoon that summer, we decided to go back down and look at some of the graffiti, maybe see if anything odd would happen while we were there. There was some new art that wasn't there before. We were distracted by it for a moment, just taking it all in, when we realized that the place was dead silent. No cicadas, no grasshoppers, no birds chirping, no fish splashing in the water. This was odd because the carp in the river loved to jump all the time. It grew so still and silent that we could hear our heartbeats in our ears. "Crap," Rick said. "It's so quiet. It's not right." "Yeah," I replied. "It's like there's something off in the air, like a pressure." I was being honest, because it did feel like we were in a pressurized jar. The air was heavy and thick. Suddenly, we heard this bird call. At first, we were relieved to hear a normal sound, but that changed in an instant, when we realized it too was wrong. It sounded like a dove, but played backwards and filtered through the noise of an old recorder. The first call was a distance away, but by the fourth call, which seemed to be a copy and paste of the other three, it seemed like it was no more than 20 feet from us. It rang out a 7th time, now sounding like it was right above us. We looked up just in time to have the ever-living crap scared out of us by a loud, heavy boom on the thick wood of the bridge. It was as if something massive had stomped or jumped down from the metal above the bridge, something so heavy that it could make the whole thing collapse. We froze. Our once moderately tanned skin was probably ghostly white then. Our eyes widened in silent screams when our mouths would not produce any sounds. We ran as fast as we could out of there, not giving a second thought to look back. Personally, I was afraid of what I would see. We made it out of the tracks and back to the road headed toward the house. I grabbed Rick by the shoulder and asked him, "Dude, what was making those noises?" I was shaky and out of breath. He answered me, "That wasn't a natural sound. I don't know, man. All I know is I don't want to go down there again." On that we agreed, wholeheartedly. Because you know what they say about curiosity and the cat. and I do not want to end up like the cat. Close Call from Match Mun. Location: Michigan. Back when I was 12, maybe 13, my mom was dating guys online. One of these guys, named P, took us and our dog Momo up to Michigan for a camping/fishing trip. The trip lasted 3 days, and during this trip, P personally took me to fish with him. This wasn't so bad, but for some reason he insisted that I wear my two-piece bikini and that the two of us should go alone together. The first times he took me to learn, since I had never fished before in my life, and it seemed fun and normal. It was one of the last few fishing expeditions before we left that P showed his true colors. I had spotted a snake in the water and was trying to catch it because I wanted to take a closer look. After the snake had gotten away, P suddenly pushed me to the ground. He stood over me with a sinister and evil look on his face. Slowly, he began to kneel down. It was then that I realized just how bigger than me he was. I wondered, in fear, what he was going to do to me. Was he going to shove my head in the water? Or was it something more disturbing? Just as he began to reach for something in his pocket while grabbing a hold of my wrist hard, I was saved by my mom calling for me to come quick. Momo had gotten loose, but she was on her way. Momo must have heard or sensed something wrong, and she came right to me, right to my side, and began growling at P. She didn't leave my side until my mom made it there. And later on, my mom said that she was feeling sick, so we left earlier than we thought we would. We packed up, headed for home, and never heard from P again. After going through health class in high school, I'm grateful that at the time I didn't end up hurt, or worse. P was a creep, and what he was reaching for in his pocket, I'm scared to know. It's Silver Glare from Green Lamp 1267. Location: unknown. When I think back to what happened when I was a kid, it makes me insanely uncomfortable. Like if I go into the water, something will come out and take my life from me. I'm not sure what I saw that day, but I'm hoping it's gone forever. Not likely, but I'm hoping. It was April 7th of 2007 when me and my dad and uncle set out to Green Lake. It was the afternoon when my uncle got his first bite of the day. It was a nice fat silver gray fish like a trout. He released it back in the water and went to pull out some more bait, not realizing until it was too late that his last bait can was empty after his last catch. When my dad went to get his fishing pole, he saw something in the water. It was a long black snake-like silhouette, but this silhouette was nearly 20 feet long and 3 feet thick. He was flabbergasted looking at it, and before he told us what he was looking at, he picked up his fishing pole, put the last of the bait on the hook, and released it next to this strange creature. Thanks to the murky water, it was too difficult to really make out what it was, but it did seem to be coming closer to the bait. Then slowly, part of it rose out of the water. It was more white now, a long-looking worm-like thing. That's when he finally told us to check it out. I saw it then for myself, its bright silver color. All of a sudden, there was a big splash that made it impossible to see the creature for a moment. Then when everything was calm again, there was a terrifying yet interesting-looking monster fish or creature. Its long snake body was out of the water, while its head was diving back under. Its body was covered in scales, and its belly was similar to a snake's. But at the top of it, there was a fin covering its back, and there were small tentacles on its side. It looked like it had very small rows of teeth on its belly too, or maybe it was something else, but it was terrifying and unnatural. I was sweating like I was in an oven staring at it, and I was scared for my life. Something in me was screaming to jump out of the boat and to swim to the shore fast, but with that thing in the water, I couldn't bring myself to do it. Then my uncle nervously said to head to the dock, slowly. My dad listened. He started the boat's engine and headed toward the dock. The creature's tail finally swept out of the water and quickly back in. We all got a good glimpse of it. It was like an elongated version of a normal fish's tail fin, yet with more of those weird tentacles on the sides. We couldn't make it back to the dock fast enough, in my opinion. Once we were there, we packed up and got in the car. I couldn't stop staring at the water though, afraid that that thing would come out again, but luckily it did not. To this day, I still wonder what's lurking down in the depths of Green Lake. The water might be clear, the fish might be plenty active, and the temperature might even be perfect. But if you let your guard down even for a moment, you could soon be immersed in a nightmare. And no, I'm not talking about catching a boot after breaking your pole. I'm talking about something coming right out of the water to make you its dinner. So, digest or be digested. It's up to you, fishermen. Good night. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. If you want to share your story with us, check out our new website at darknessprevailsofficial.discussion.community. If you want to support the show, go to patreon.com/darknessprevails to donate, or check out our merchandise at teespring.com/stores/darknessprevails. Now, as usual, here are my 5 favorite early comments from the previous full episode about 10 real monsters in the woods. Borikua says, "Dang, DP, you caught me off guard again. Oh well, back to the bathroom I go, because these creepy stories make me have serious bowel problems. Thank you for helping me out, buddy." You're really welcome. Of all the things I've been told I help with, from boredom to sleepiness, bowel movements is a new one, and I guess I'm happy I can help. Would you call it a dark dump? Anyway. Jose Chavez says, "Hello and goodbye. Just stopped by to drop a like and a comment. We'll listen to this at work on Monday." Well, now that I'm in the future, I hope the episode really helped. Lord knows scary stories have always been my savior on long work days. ABCZ says, "Yeah, my kind of stories. Time to get mac and cheese and cat." And going along with what M. Reynaldi Yusuf said, it does kind of sound like you're eating mac and cheese with cat in it. And while that may be delicious, let's hope the poor thing isn't covered in cheese right now. Brandon Matza says, "How about stories when under the influence? I actually did a video kinda like that, but it would be pretty cool to get some stories of really bad trips, for sure." And Beautiful Oblivion says, "Thumbs up before I even watch it, because I save these for bedtime." I don't know whether to be worried or confused, because you put bedtime in quotation marks, but I'm gonna guess that you don't do goat things during bed while you listen to my show. But if you do, I'm not judging. Well, that brings us to the end of this Darkness Prevails episode. But don't you worry, because more scary stories are on the way soon, so stay tuned. Until next time, here are the credits to my amazing patrons who continue to donate. Remember, stay safe out there, and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.